I'm Jacob Courtwright, and this is The Locker Room. What is going on, everybody? Welcome into another episode of The Locker Room. Thank you to everybody who is rejoining us, The Locker Room faithful as I will call you, and to everybody who is new to the podcast. Welcome in. I hope you enjoy it. If you like us, share us with a friend. If you want to stay up to date with everything The Locker Room has going on, it's super simple. Add The Locker Room on our social medias. The Locker Room Podcast 615 on Instagram, The Locker Room Host Jacob on Facebook, TLR with Jacob on Twitter, and The Locker Room 22 on TikTok. This episode is brought to you by FNX Fitness. Go to fnxfit.com. That is fnxfit.com for all of your health and fitness needs. From clothing to equipment to recoveries to supplements to gains, anything you need to have a happier and healthier and better version of you, go to FNX Fit and use your promo code TLRHOST. That is TLRHOST for 15% off your order. Okay. So this week there's been this trend going on all over social media. It was first put out by ESPN, then of course Bleacher Report, and everybody picked up on it. And the big question was, and I wanted to talk about it on the podcast because it made my mind think a whole lot, which usually it doesn't do, in case you can't tell. But it was, is it easier to win a championship in the NFL or the NBA? And so I thought I'd start off the show by addressing my thoughts on this question because I think it's a lot more detailed than a lot of people give it credit for. I'm not going to make it overcomplicated, I promise. I won't bore you to death. But here's my take on it. I think it is harder to win a championship in the NBA. I think it is harder in the playoffs for the NFL. I know it sounds weird that I broke it down this way. But if we're talking about like how to win a championship, that final game. So the NBA has 7 games in order to be claimed a champion. Could go 7 games, possibility of 7 games. The NFL has 1 game to win the Super Bowl. That's it. You get 1 shot, boom. So I know a lot of people are thinking, well, you get 1 shot, that's a lot harder. Yeah, but if you're the better team and you play just your overall good football like you have been all year, there's a 63% chance that you're going to win that football game. I mean, that's just statistical facts, right? If you are the better NFL team, all you have to do is play 63% of what you've been producing, whether it's throughout the year or throughout the playoffs, either one, and you are more likely to take that Super Bowl championship. Going into the playoffs, the Bucs, or the whole playoff run, the Bucs were playing the best football out of anybody, and it didn't stop in the Super Bowl. Their defense played the best. Their offense was doing very well. Like, they just literally cruised to a Super Bowl this year because they were just playing their A game. Now, you give Patrick Mahomes a best-of-7 series, well, all Patrick Mahomes has to do is go for those 400 or 500-yard games, and next thing you know, we're locked up in a 3-3 series going into a Game 7 for the Super Bowl, right? So it's a lot easier for the better teams to win in the NFL when it comes to the Super Bowl. When it comes to the Super Bowl, I think it's a lot easier in the NFL. The NBA is so much harder to win a championship because it's a best-of-7 series. I mean, hell, the easiest example of this, the Golden State Warriors in 2016. 3-1 lead on the Cleveland Cavaliers. It's game over. It's done. The Cleveland Cavaliers have the first 3-1 comeback in NBA history, win the championship, right? It's a lot harder in the NBA because when you have guys that can erupt from top to bottom, and I mean, we've seen I say no-name guys, but we've seen guys come off the bench and drop 30 and 40 points, Tracy McGrady's of the world. Like, we've seen this happen. Eric Gordon is one of the more recent ones I can think of from Houston, coming off the bench and scoring like 36 in a playoff game. Like, that can happen any given night. Basketball is one of those weird sports where these players can go off. You can go off for 65 one night, then you can go off for 6 the next night. Like, that's just how the NBA works. So in the NBA, if your shots aren't falling, you better have defense to back you up. And there's not a lot of good defensive teams in the NBA anymore. Let's be honest. So it's a lot harder in the NBA to win a championship. There's a lot of factors that go into it, and you could play the greatest game, and this is what I'm the more the point I'm getting to. In the NBA, you could play the greatest game one in your history. Let's just pick the Lakers. Let's say the Lakers drop 163 points. LeBron has 80. He could play the greatest game in the world, and they could still lose the championship. The NBA, that 7-game series for a championship. The NBA is a lot harder to win a championship. When you look at the Super Bowl, it's a lot easier to win a Super Bowl. Teams, like I said, that play the better football going into it are usually the teams that have of course, barring injury and barring turnovers and stuff like that, are usually the teams that come out on top on the other side. Now, let's go to the playoff side, because I'm kind of separating playoffs and championships. It is a lot easier in the NBA to go through the playoffs than it is the NBA championship, and it is a lot harder in the NFL to go through the playoffs than it is the championship. You see, in the NBA, usually, this is usually, I know there's exceptions, and I'm not talking about exceptions. Usually, the better team always comes out on top. Last year, and someone brought this up to me when I was talking to them about it, well, Denver beat the Clippers last year. Guess what? Denver was the better team. All the way around. I had screamed it from the mountaintops from the beginning of the NBA season that the Clippers would not make the NBA championship and the Lakers would claim the throne. Guess what? I was right. Me and Nick Wright, and I think one other person in the world were the only ones talking about this. But plain and simple was the better team won. The Denver Nuggets dominated. They had better guard play. They had no answer for Jokic. They had better bench play. They were the better team. So in the NBA playoffs, and you're going through just the rounds leading up to it, usually, and of course, if you're a higher seed, it's even easier. You're playing just bad team after bad team. There's a lot of times we've seen the number 1 seed or number 2 seed literally just scoot by into the championship, right? Literally have played nobody, and they get into the championship, and that's their first test. I think we can even go back to the Golden State Warriors when they beat the Lakers, when they were up on the Cavaliers 3-1 in that 2016 run. They had barely any competition coming out of the West. It was an easy glide to the championship. So when they hit adversity, they didn't really know how to respond to it. Now in the NFL, those 1 games are the hardest games, I think, in the entire world. Without being an actual NFL player, it's hard to say. But I would guess that the NFL playoffs, the rounds leading up to the Super Bowl, are 10 times harder than the NBA's. Because like I said, best of 7, usually the better teams are always going to come out on top. In the NFL, when you have a Bills-Bucks, when you have a Ravens-Chiefs, all it takes is one of those games for Lamar Jackson to scramble or to run for 135 yards and throw for 300, and they beat you by 40. And does that necessarily mean that Lamar is going to be doing that every single game? No. All it takes is one player to just snap in the NFL or have a great game. One quarterback, I should say, more likely. Running backs vary. If it's a Derrick Henry type, that the game leans on, there's different. And we saw Derrick Henry run the Titans to an AFC championship 2 years ago. All it takes is one of those guys to get hot, and it's done. It's over for that other team. In the NBA, that one guy gets hot, well, guess what? There's still 6 games left. So it's a lot easier for the playoff scenario in the NBA than it is in the NFL playoff scenario. But championship-wise, the Super Bowl is easier than the NBA championship. Plain and simple. And like I said, there are exceptions. Of course, the Lakers versus the Heat last year, nobody expected the Heat to do what they did. But, that was a pretty easy playoff series, or I guess championship series, we could say. But, listen, Golden State, Cleveland, 2016, the best example of it. We saw what the Bucks did in the playoffs. They dominated everybody, and when they got to that championship game, the Super Bowl, it was pretty easy that the Bucks were the best team in football. Defense was playing on all cylinders. The offense was running on all cylinders. It was game over. So there it is. There's my argument. This is is that dress, what was the dress? Is it white and gold, or is it black and silver, whatever that thing was? That is the nerdy sports version of that, right? So I'd love to know what you think, because this has been a fun conversation that I've had with a lot of people. Now, to the men of the hour, in quotation marks, the three fighters, we've got to talk about Logan Paul, Jake Paul, and Floyd Mayweather. All right? You all know I'm not a Jake Paul fan. You all know that I could care so little for Logan Paul as well, even though I think Logan Paul is a lot better of a person than Jake Paul, and I kind of like him at times. And Floyd Mayweather, I'm kind of indifferent. I don't really like him, don't really hate him. I don't really care about him. We could talk about boxers, and I'm actually going to do that in an upcoming episode. We could talk about boxers and how he's the greatest boxer of all time statistically, but I don't necessarily think that he's the greatest and most skilled boxer of all time. I'd like to see him fight Manny Pacquiao one more time. He's definitely beat some prime amazing guys. But there was a stint in his career where he was kind of going through some high schoolers with some mitts, right? Like, well, I'm not going to get into it. Floyd's the greatest boxer of all time. I will give it to you. But, we've got to talk about these guys because my hatred for Jake Paul just grows, and I think my hatred for Mayweather and Logan Paul is starting to grow as well. Because this is turning into exactly what I thought it was going to turn into. So for those of you who don't know, for those of you who just kind of scroll on Instagram or Facebook and then you see Jake Paul and it says gotcha hat and you're like, what the heck? I don't understand what this is. Don't worry, I'll give you a brief rundown. So Logan Paul and Floyd Mayweather went to Hard Rock Stadium in Miami to do a little pre-tour trash talk, which let's stop there. It was terrible. Logan Paul is not the showman that Jake Paul is. For what I dislike about Jake Paul is the greatest promoter in sports history. This guy is a YouTuber who has promoted himself as one of the best boxers in the world, who people actually believe is a very good boxer, has gotten 3 fights and sold, allegedly, it was made $65 million on his last pay-per-view. I don't know the actual numbers. But that is the greatest scam in history. But Logan Paul is not, Logan Paul is a good personality, a good podcaster, but he's not good at promoting fights. So when you have somebody that's not good at promoting fights, and if you've watched a lot of fights or fight press conferences, it's very awkward. The reason Conor McGregor rose to so much stardom and power is because he's an amazing promoter of himself. People would tune in to the pre-fight press conferences in record numbers to watch Conor McGregor and see what craziness he would say. And guess what? He moved needles on pre-fight press conferences. That is a big part of fighters' games, is creating a personality and then being able to sell themselves to an audience. Why should I buy, a pay-per-view? Why should I spend $70 on the fight? Well, because look at me, I'm this, I'm that. That is a big part of the fight game. Logan Paul does not have that down whatsoever. Logan Paul is not really a fighter. He is a good behind-the-microphone personality. He's a very good businessman, I'm trying to give them as much credit before I trash them, but he's a very good businessman, right? He's made a lot of very smart decisions. Him and his brother, have made themselves millionaires off of YouTube and Vine and whatever else they've done. And Floyd Mayweather was never really that great at press conferences either. It was just the fact that Floyd Mayweather is the greatest fighter of all time, has been undefeated. That moves the needle so that his trash talking or his microphone game doesn't have to come into play. The reason Conor McGregor and Floyd Mayweather was one of the biggest fights of all time was the fact that Conor McGregor had thousands of people screaming F the Mayweathers. He was sunning that man on stage, and he's, Conor McGregor, arguably him, The Rock, people like that are the greatest self-promoters of all time, and look at what brand they have grown into. People fall in love with people. They don't fall in love with what you do. LeBron James is a great basketball player, but look at what Michael Jordan created his brand to be. Air Jordan, be like Mike. People fell in love with Michael Jordan. People never really fell in love with LeBron James as a person. They fell in love with him as a basketball player. Those are two different things. There's a reason that Jordan has the most successful shoe in history. There's a reason that, the name Michael Jordan just basically has angels around it, right? Because he was a great self-promoter. So Logan Paul doesn't have the self-promoting thing down. Neither does Floyd Mayweather. Floyd Mayweather, the only reason people are interested is the fact that Floyd Mayweather is undefeated. So right off the bat, I've already got a negative vibe of this whole thing. I'm like, God, this is just another one of those stupid-ass celebrity boxing matches that I'm going to pay for no reason. I'm going to be upset at the end of the night. And there's no one there going, listen, like, look, like, you need to be promoting this fight different. This fight's already been canceled once, which a lot of people don't know. And a lot of people are like, oh, they just had to move it for undisclosed reasons. They had to move it because they couldn't get sales. They couldn't get people interested in this pay-per-view. Because why would anybody want to watch older, washed-up Floyd Mayweather fight a YouTuber, not Jake Paul, who is a great self-promoter, but the older brother who's boring. No one really talks about him when it comes to the fight game. He lost his last fight to another YouTuber, right? Like, no, if this was Jake Paul, Floyd Mayweather, I think now you've got people interested because Jake Paul would push this fight and Jake Paul would be the ground promoter. Ben Askren was the ground promoter and, in their last fight. So it was a great tandem for that fight. They brought in a lot of numbers because Ben Askren likes to talk back. So does Jake. So like that fight makes sense. This one doesn't to me. You need to have someone in there going, wow, look at the size difference. Logan's so much bigger than Floyd. Floyd's never fought anybody this big. Floyd intentionally dodged people throughout his career that were bigger and stronger than he. That's just a proven fact. So, that's a narrative. That's a story you can push. Floyd's dodged all these guys because of size, because of their strength, because of this, because of that. And Logan, that could be, hey, Logan's a big guy. He's never fought anybody this big. He's never fought anybody this strong. That's an intriguing road to go down. But if you're just talking, boxer versus boxer, and we're supposed to get excited, no. Floyd Mayweather, the greatest boxer of all time, is going to piece apart Logan Paul. Might not even get hit, to be honest. I mean, Logan Paul is I'm not going to say terrible boxer, but he's not very good. He could beat me, and I've never boxed once in my life, right? But he's not that good of a boxer. Go back to the KSI fight, the second one where KSI beat him. I mean, KSI was wildly untalented at boxing, and he was piecing apart Logan Paul, right? So we know how this fight's going to go down as long as it's not rigged, like a lot of people have talked about. I'm not saying I'm one of those people, but I'm saying I'm one of those people that believes that celebrity fights are bullcrap. Just like go back to the Mike Tyson fight. Mike Tyson dominated Roy Jones Jr., and I mean dominated. I had it 10-9, 10-8 almost every single round, and everybody just, I'm an idiot, basically, which is fine. It was a draw. They did the draw out of respect. It's all rigged. It's all bullcrap. This isn't Jake versus Mayweather. But somehow, and it's brilliant, Jake decides that he's going to help promote this fight because I think Jake sees the writing on the wall. He sees that Big Brother ain't getting eyeballs to this. He sees that Floyd Mayweather, no matter how big of and great of a boxer he is, Floyd Mayweather's not very good at getting eyes to this. Floyd Mayweather, we'll talk about him, and I'll get to that in just a moment. And we'll talk about Conor McGregor and what he tweeted out because I think that's very important as to what's going on as well. But you have two guys that aren't good at promoting themselves, don't have good brands besides Floyd Money Mayweather. All he cares about is money. And everybody else that he's ever fought, basically, everybody was just curious, can anybody ever break the undefeated streak? That's the only reason they were ever tuning into Floyd Mayweather. He's a boring boxer who plays nothing but defense, raps, and just scores his points. Listen, more power to him. Greatest boxer of all time, but he's not a big personality that people go, wow, he's not Conor McGregor. Conor McGregor sold that fight between them, not Floyd. So anyways, Jake decides that he's going to help promote this fight and did it brilliantly. I'm going to guarantee you that they had merchandise ready. They had the merchandise ready before this happened. So Jake Paul decides that he's going to antagonize Floyd the whole press conference, and you can see Jake, he's, at the bottom of the stairs. He's untying his shoe. He's trash talking him while he's trying to do this horrible banter between Logan Paul. So, Jake's just messing with Floyd while he's talking to Big Brother. And so afterwards, Jake decides he's going to confront Floyd Mayweather, right? And I think 100% this was all planned to push the fight. It is brilliant, and I will commend Jake Paul for being the best fight promoter, honestly, at this point, it seems like of all time, because the fact that this dumbass kid has had 3 fights that have been nationally televised, and he's calling himself the greatest boxer, and people believe him, just had to point that one out there, it makes sense. So Jake Paul goes up to Floyd Mayweather. He's talking his trash, right? And, I'll beat you. Why don't you go 2 brothers in one night? I'll go back to back. You fight Logan, then you fight me, blah, 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 blah. I'll knock you out. So then, it's the banter starts dying down. So what he does is he rips off Floyd's hat. Floyd's wearing a hat, and he goes, got your hat. Grabs the hat and tries to run away. Gotcha, bitch. So he yells, gotcha, tries to run away, and Floyd's bodyguard / the starting offensive lineman from the Dallas Cowboys decide that this ain't going to play. So they're choking Jake Paul. It looks like, allegedly, because we saw that Jake Paul had a cracked nose and a black eye, that Floyd punched him directly in the face, which if so, that's the best thing that's happened in a very long time to Jake Paul, is that someone actually humbled him for 5 seconds. But the whole thing was a giant promotion. 100% a giant promotion. It was brilliant. Jake Paul literally had merch, the gotcha hat. Literally, he put it on a hat and was selling something crazy. Like $25, he put it on his website and was selling out of gotcha hats. Right? So, like, Jake Paul is brilliant for what he did. They're trying to play this up as this giant real beef that Jake Paul and Floyd Mayweather and, Jake's now... See, now this is where I think Jake did mess up a little bit, is Jake's now apparently banned from the fight. He's banned from Hard Rock Stadium. He can't go to the Floyd-Logan fight. So now there's no possibility of a Jake Paul, Floyd Mayweather, and Logan Paul, Floyd Mayweather in one night fight, which I think that is intriguing. I think the Logan Paul, Floyd Mayweather fight, Mayweather will be lucky to scratch 10 million from the numbers that we're looking at right now. So I'm not going to talk about Jake Paul anymore because, listen, we can talk till we're blue in the face about Jake not fighting a real fighter, Jake trying to fight all these UFC guys that have backgrounds in grappling. He won't fight a real striker. He won't fight a real boxer. We can talk about Tommy Fury being probably the best scenario to be evenly matched. Tommy Fury's a much better boxer, but would be a very intriguing fight that I think a lot of people would actually tune in for as a real boxing match, not this little... 3 rounds, a minute apiece, blah, 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 bullcrap. We know that Canelo and Conor McGregor, guys like that, that's not going to happen for Jake Paul, at least not anytime soon. So we could talk about Jake Paul all day long, but this is more focused on the Logan Mayweather. So they can't push the needle for the numbers. So Jake does a great promotion, grabs Floyd's hat, Floyd punches him in the face. It's this big brawl. It's on all over the news. Now people are talking about the Logan Mayweather fight. Oh, this is going to be interesting because Logan did this bull crap. Boo-hoo, woe is me. I can't believe that Mayweather said he wants to kill my brother and my brother's going to die and blah, 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 blah. They're amazing actors, right? They do such a good job at being hated by everybody in the entire world. And guess what? If they're making money being hated, more power to them. So now the fight's got some intrigue because of little brother Jake. Now let's get Jake's name out my mouth because I don't want to hear that dumbass's name anymore on this podcast. But Logan and Mayweather now have a conundrum. Can they keep this momentum going? We know that Jake's going to have some social media presence, but now that Jake is banned from everything, can Logan and Mayweather bring this fight to where it's actually intriguing? Is this fight going to be intriguing? Is this fight going to be rigged? Is this going to be another one of those Ben Askren, in quotation marks, getting knocked out and then laughing his ass off all the way back to the locker room? Yeah, because, Ben Askren, they're saying, made not just a million, millions on fight night. I don't know. And that's the big reason that I am not for the celebrity boxing crap. This is a big reason that the boxing community doesn't like any of this. Hell, the boxing community is actually starting to go anti-Mayweather as well. Like, they see that Mayweather's just selling out for $1 here and $1 there. Mayweather is the prostitute of money, right? Wherever someone's going to pay Mayweather, he's going to go there and prostitute himself out for it. So, now, literally, the boxing community is no longer backing any of this. Triller put on the worst fight night in history. And the only chance that celebrity boxing, because I'm going to just say it's celebrity boxing because Jake is not a real boxer yet until he fights real boxers, not real fighters, real boxers. The only chance that Triller has at putting on a decent event and or having eyes on that event is Jake Paul being the headline star. Logan's not that guy. Mayweather, while it's a big name, while he's the greatest boxer of all time, blah, 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 Mayweather's not that guy. Mayweather's just trying to collect a check. So here's my problem with it all. Those are all just my surrounding concerns, right? I just kind of wanted to crap on all of this for a while. Floyd Mayweather and Conor McGregor tweeted out a very interesting tweet. He posted all over social media. He posted a picture of him sunning Floyd Mayweather, where he put his hand on top of his head and was pushing him and trash talking him during their fight promotion. And he said, "I don't understand what you're doing, Floyd." I'm paraphrasing here, of course. He said, "I don't understand what you're doing, Floyd. I don't know the accent. I'm sorry, guys. You should have killed me when you had the chance. That's a little bit better, right? But, he... Guys, I never said I was an actor, okay? I also never claimed to be a podcaster either. I'm just a guy who somehow bought a mic, learned how to do it on a computer, and I just throw it out there. That will forever probably haunt my dreams. But he's like, basically, he posted all over social media, like, what are you doing, Floyd? You could fight a lower level guy, a boxer that is actually a boxer, someone that we're not going to... He's not going to fight top-tier guys anymore, let's be honest. The only chance of that happening is him and older Manny Pacquiao, because they're both older guys, going at it one more time, which would be very, very intriguing. But he could box in a professional setting, could box a lower-level guy and command 20, 25 million, and without a doubt, he would make his 25 million and, would probably dominate the fight. So my big question surrounding all of this is, what's Floyd doing it for? Does Floyd not have the juice that he used to have, and he just doesn't want to get back in the ring because, he's retired 12 times? Does Floyd need the money that bad? Because if so, why doesn't he go fight one of these lower-level boxers that, the boxing community will be happy because Floyd Mayweather's still boxing. He's not, doing celebrity crap. He could fight a guy that he knows he'll probably beat, and he could get $25 million for it. So why Logan Paul? Why this? Basically, right now, from what we're seeing number-wise, it's going to be about a $10 million payday, scratching the surface of $10 million. And that's exactly what Conor McGregor is saying. He's like, why don't you go fight? In his message, he said, I don't understand why you don't go fight some lower-level guy, command your $25 million, get your $25 million, and go home. Why are you trying to sell yourself out, basically, to the streets for Logan Paul and these Paul brothers? Because I think Floyd Mayweather is trying to hedge his bet that Logan Paul is Jake Paul, and he's not. If Mayweather wanted this to be massive, if Mayweather wanted to shut Jake Paul up, like I said, I don't know how much of this is real or not. Whenever I see Jake Paul fight a real boxer in a professional setting, not under Triller's umbrella, that's when I'll be relaxed and know that Jake Paul is fighting a real fight. But if Mayweather wanted to hitch his horse to the right wagon, it should have been Jake Paul, not Logan Paul. Logan Paul does not demand what Jake Paul does. The eyes aren't on Logan like they are on Jake. And Mayweather looks like a fool. He looks like those dads that show up at YMCA in the afternoon, not at the 5 a.m. dads. Those dudes are awesome. They play great team basketball. But like the 3:30 dads, right? The dads that show up with like arm sleeves and think that they still play in college and they're trying to run with all the younger kids, and we're just like, dude, go home. Don't you have an episode of Family Guy or Cops to go lay on a couch and watch and drink a beer? Like, you don't need to be with the young bucks anymore. And that's kind of what it's like. It's like Mayweather right now is the older dad showing up in tall white knee-high socks and a headband and a shooting sleeve who used to be pro, 25 years ago and thinks he's still pro at 55 years old, and all the young guys can't stand fighting him or playing against him. Like, he hitched his horse to the wrong wagon. So either Floyd Mayweather is that desperate for cash that he's trying to get the quickest cash grab, or Floyd Mayweather is a moron and doesn't understand business technique, what he's doing. This should have been Floyd versus Jake any day of the week. That would command Floyd would get 20 million. That he would get exactly what he would get if he would fight a real professional fight under the athletic rules and everything else. So I just don't get this play for Mayweather. I don't know if he's just doing it for fun. I don't know. Because if he loses, it looks horrible on him. If he wins, nobody cares because Logan Paul is not the acclaimed best boxer in the world. Jake Paul wears that crown right now. Everybody's saying he's one of the greatest boxers, blah, 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 blah. Right? You knock out that kid, now people are glad. Now your clout is even higher because you've knocked out the one guy that everybody in the world hates. Then if you lose to Jake, now Jake has actual credibility. And now you have the not only the most obnoxious kid in the world, now you have Jake Paul on steroids running around the world because he knocked out the greatest boxer of all time. Like, that makes sense to me. I don't get it. I don't. I know it's probably annoying how much I complain about it, but I don't know. Let me know what you think. Are you going to watch it? Are you going to pay the money for it? Because illegal streaming doesn't exist. But do you care about Logan versus Mayweather? Or would you rather see Jake versus Mayweather? Or would you rather see Mayweather fight an actual real boxer in a professional setting in a professional fight? I don't know if Mayweather's terrified he can't win those fights anymore. I don't know if Mayweather's just trying to thought he was going to get a much bigger payday than he already is, because we've already seen this thing canceled once because numbers and money isn't there. I don't know. This doesn't seem like a smart play, but kudos to Jake Paul, who made one of the most meme-worthy things of all time, which is, gotcha hat. He's now selling merch. He got it tattooed on his leg. Like, Jake Paul is the greatest fight promoter of all time. So there's your props, Jake. For those of you who say I don't ever give Jake props, there's your props. So we are just a week away, 9 days away from the NBA playoffs getting ready to start, May 18th, right? Now, I don't want to get into predictions yet. I'm going to get in predictions probably the week of I'll probably give them next week. It's probably going to be my official predictions, who I'm going to predict. I'll give you my brackets once we know officially everything. It's kind of like my NCAA bracket. I'll do a little video on that. But there's a lot of big question marks coming into these NBA playoffs. Listen, this is the first time in my life I have ever seen this many unhealthy superstars ever getting ready to head into the playoffs. Now, I know a lot of people have a conspiracy theory going around that they're just doing this because they're pissed that they had to start the season so early and it wasn't later and blah, 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 blah. And if that's the case, then they get what they deserve. There's a reason that ratings keep plummeting, because stars aren't playing right now. Now I know they don't care because a lot of these stars are still getting their paychecks. But if I'm their teammates, if I'm these guys we rely on TV ratings for our bonuses and all that, I would be pissed, right? So let's just say, for the sake of argument, we're not going to go down the conspiracy theory road, that all these superstars are truly injured all the time like they are. When you have LeBron James, Anthony Davis, Kevin Durant, James Harden, Kyrie Irving, Giannis for a little bit, Joel Embiid, when you have all of these, Kawhi Leonard, Paul George, when you have all these guys either sitting out, injured, or not playing in back-to-back games, you have a problem in the NBA. The biggest problem is the NBA playoffs start the next week. Now, the Los Angeles Lakers have dropped, I think, all the way back to the 7th seed, which means that right now, unless they go on a tear the rest of the way out, they are going to be in the play-in game. So they're going to be in that little play-in tournament, which I don't think benefits the Los Angeles Lakers whatsoever. Now, I think they get out of the play-in game without a doubt. They're not going to lose to the Golden State Warriors more than once. They're not going to lose to the Grizzlies or whoever else is there. Honestly, I haven't looked at it too hard yet. But they're not going to lose the play-in game. But the big problem is continuity going into the playoffs. Teams that don't have guys that have played together, can gel together, and have played at least a handful of games are going to be in trouble via the Brooklyn Nets, the Los Angeles Lakers. Those two big name teams that are supposed to be the big matchup in the NBA championship this year are in a lot of trouble. We saw it last year. The Los Angeles Clippers decided that they were too cool. They weren't going to play games. They weren't going to play back-to-backs. And this year, the same thing with the Los Angeles Clippers. Kawhi's sitting down. Patrick Beverley's been out. Serge Ibaka's been out. Like, the big-name teams might not be in the NBA championship this year. Because come playoff time, you can't try and figure out team chemistry. You can't try and figure out, rotations. It doesn't work that way. The reason the Los Angeles Lakers were so benefited from last year was the fact that they were one of very few teams that had the rotations down. They had a head coach that understood what he was doing from game to game. And when you have LeBron James who can make an offense flow, whoever's on the court, and Alex Caruso who really stepped up, and Kentavious Caldwell-Pope who started hitting knockdown shots, that's a recipe for a championship. So heading into these NBA playoffs, I'm worried for the Los Angeles Lakers, the Los Angeles Clippers, the Brooklyn Nets, a big one, and the 76ers. Now, the 76ers, they've been playing together pretty well, but the problem is they're blowing 19 and 20-point leads. Like, they're blowing teams out in quarters 1 through 3, and then they're having to put all their starters back in the fourth quarter. They can't close a basketball game. So first and foremost, my biggest concern for the NBA is that these stars aren't going to be 100%, and we're not going to get the shows that we have all been waiting for all year. We are not going to get the Brooklyn Nets versus the Los Angeles Lakers if neither one of these teams can get out of the second round. Listen, Brooklyn, I don't care how great of scorers you are. If you can't stop anybody, you're going to lose basketball games. We have seen that. They had 4 straight losses. And Nick Wright pulled up a very interesting fact on those last 4 losses. Broke them down, right? In the final 2 minutes, they allowed, in those 4 games, within 1 possessions, right? 1 possession games, they allowed 17 layups. 17 easy layups to close out basketball games. The reason that they lost those games was due to 17 layups. Kevin Durant, Kyrie, and James Harden are very gifted scorers. Kevin Durant and James Harden in the categories of, some of the greatest scorers of all time. James Harden's still been out with an injury. We don't know if he's going to come back healthy. And you're asking Kevin Durant to do too much. You're asking him to be the best defender on the floor, but also give you 35 to win basketball games. That's never going to happen. And when you're not, especially a new team like this with a first-year head coach, if you're not on the court together, you're in a lot of trouble. There are very few times in NBA history, if at all, that a team that put together a super team won the championship that year. So they put together a super team, right? And now they're injured the entire time. They've lost 4 straight, and they are they're 27th right now in defensive efficiency. So they're one of the worst defensive teams in the entire NBA. So that's the big question mark for these Brooklyn Nets. Can they stay healthy, and can they ever lock down enough on defense in order to stop when they need the stops? Not give wide open layups. 17 to be exact in those 4 games came in under the final 2 minutes, and those layups put those other teams ahead. So it's not like they just don't matter, right? Now let's go to my concerns for the Los Angeles Lakers. Same thing. We can't find anybody healthy on the roster. LeBron James came back for a game, his ankle hurt, now he's back out. Anthony Davis is the most tic-tac superstar I think I've ever seen. Constantly hurt, constantly got a hurt finger, hurt back, hurt leg. He doesn't put enough work in the workout gym. Doesn't spend millions of in the gym. Doesn't spend millions of dollars on his body to upkeep his superstardom. The same problem that Kevin Durant has too. They do not spend enough money on their body. They don't take care of their bodies enough. So Los Angeles Lakers, yes, if LeBron James come back, he is the end-all, be-all. He is the fix-everything guy. But if LeBron James isn't 100% healthy, this Los Angeles Lakers team is not making it out of the second round. They're just not. The way the Suns, the Jazz, the Nuggets, the Clippers, the way all these teams are starting to play, even though I think the Clippers have a lot of question marks still, they're not going to make it out of the second round. Anthony Davis has to start becoming a stronger, better superstar. He is so weak, so tic-tac, back spasms, hurt toe, hurt finger, strained calf, whatever it is, he's always out. And now you have no Dennis Schroeder, no LeBron James. The Lakers need to take these next few games very serious, and they need to get LeBron James back. He's supposed to be back this coming week, or this week actually. So they need to get him back and get into some sort of rhythm, because right now it's chaos. Vogel doesn't know what he's doing substitution-wise. This team makes no sense. Andre Drummond's been a letdown, and they have no clear direction, no clear rotations. Listen, while I admire what Frank Vogel did, having the guts to sit Dwight Howard and JaVale when it didn't make sense, having the guts to play Morris when you needed to, that doesn't work if it's just on a night-to-night basis. You can't change the lineup 15 times throughout the week and then expect any kind of continuity or gelling. It's never going to happen. So they get LeBron James back. They've got to go on some sort of streak here, and I need to see a team that plays together if I'm going to have any confidence in making my picks next week. Any confidence at all. Now, the Los Angeles Clippers are the same thing that I have a problem with the Brooklyn Nets, is they have no size. Defensive-wise, they're asking Kawhi Leonard and Paul George to do too much. Therefore, they're giving up way too many open baskets on the other end. And we've seen Kawhi Leonard crap. This is the most up and down I've ever seen Kawhi Leonard. I don't know if he's having knee pains again or whatever it is. It's arthritis. I know he has back problems, whatever. But I've never seen him so up and down. Has a game where he goes for 34, then has a game where he goes for 13 and 0 for 3 from the three-point line and misses the 2-game winners. That's just not what superstars do that often. And we're seeing Kawhi Leonard make a pattern of it. 2 games good, 2 games bad, 1 game okay. And that's not okay if you're the Los Angeles Clippers. Tyronn Lue ripping into Paul George and Kawhi Leonard the other night because he said, listen, they beat the Lakers by 20-plus points. when they didn't have AD, when they didn't have LeBron James, when they didn't have Dennis Schroeder. So their three best players are not playing. And, they're running their mouths and pounding their chests. And Ty Lue's like, listen, we're going to get into the same fail-safe that we did last year, which is thinking we're the greatest team ever, and then realizing we have no rebounding, realizing that when we run into teams like the Denver Nuggets and the Los Angeles Lakers, we're going to have a lot of problems. So the way these NBA playoffs are starting to shape up, I'm worried for a lot of these good teams. I'm worried for a lot of these teams that I and a lot of people are predicting are going to the championship or going to be in the West Championship game and the East Championship games. Now, I think the Bucks are starting to peak at the right time. They beat Brooklyn twice this week. But what it's going to take, and we've always talked about this, is Giannis Antetokounmpo, his name's so fun to say, hitting a consistent jump shot from the outside. We saw the Nets' recipe to try and beat Giannis. Give him a ton of space. Then what happens when Giannis hits 3 or 4 threes? Oh, now you lose, and you lose by a lot. I mean, it just is what it is. Giannis is only 26 years old and is one of the biggest freak athletes we have ever seen in NBA history, right? So when Giannis is hitting threes, there's nothing you can do. But the Nets have no defense to stop Giannis from driving either, so Giannis is probably the worst matchup for the Brooklyn Nets because they just don't have any way of stopping Giannis. And I think Drew Holiday is one of the more underrated assets on that team, dropping 23, 24 a night, along with Chris Middleton, who's become a very, very good role player. The Bucks are starting to gel at the right point, and I've always talked about this. You want to be playing your best basketball going into the NBA playoffs, which is why I said these Nets, these Lakers, these Clippers, they can't have any more games off. They can't have any more superstars sitting. They can't afford it. You need to be playing your best basketball going into the playoffs, and right now they're not doing that. None of them. So I like what I'm seeing from the Bucks. 76ers, same thing as, can Joel Embiid stay healthy enough? If so, I think the 76ers might be my dark horse to make the NBA championship. And hell, if the Lakers keep shaping up the way they are, win the NBA championship. Ben Simmons is the best defender in the NBA right now. I don't care about Gobert. I don't care about Rudy Gobert. Rudy Gobert is an empty calorie number. He is Russell Westbrook's triple doubles. If it's not leading you to wins, it doesn't matter. I'm not a big Rudy Gobert fan. I don't think what Rudy Gobert brings to the defensive end is all that special, and I think it gets exposed every single playoff time comes around. Small guards drive around him. He fouls a lot, and next thing you know, you're no good when you're sitting on the bench. But Ben Simmons is strong. He can handle the basketball. He's a fantastic passer, and he can guard all 5 positions if he has to. I'm a big, big fan of Ben Simmons right now. Ben Simmons right now. And Joel Embiid, moving on to him, Joel Embiid up until probably 2 months ago when he kept getting hurt, was the best player on the planet, playing like it at least. I don't think he is the best player on the planet. He was playing like the best player on the planet, though. Both defensively and offensively, just putting up 40-plus games with, 3 blocks and 2 steals every night like it was nothing. So I'm interested to see how all this plays out. I don't think we're going to get a surprise team this year. We're not going to get a Miami Heat. The Utah Jazz aren't going to somehow make a miraculous run to the championship. Unless these teams can't stay healthy. And that's always the big question mark leading into these NBA playoffs. Before I give you my predictions, if I could think of the word, this coming week, this next week's episode, before I give you any of that, I need to know, are these teams healthy and have they had any time to play together? If by May 18th this has not happened, I'm in serious worry for a lot of these big-name teams, and we might see Jazz versus the 76ers finals, or Suns versus 76ers. I don't know. The way this is shaping up is not good for a lot of these bigger NBA teams. Like I said, always hit me up in the comments. Let me know. Is there a team that you think might be a dark horse to be NBA champions this year or make the championship game? Where's your team standing? Are they struggling? Always, my DMs are open. I'd love to. I actually just conversed with a fan over the Packers pick in the NFL draft. He said Eric Stokes was a fantastic pickup, which I calmly replied. In the second round, he's a great pickup. In the first round, And you've already lost the draft because you've lost Aaron Rodgers, which we are going to get to when more information comes out. But yeah, there it is. Another episode is in the books. I want to thank you all for joining me so much. It's so fun that people listen to this podcast. And if you enjoy us, if you like us, share us with a friend. Listen, the more you share and the more love you share it with everybody, the bigger this thing can get and the better we are going to try and get for you. So there's a lot of work going into it. We've got a bunch of new things coming out this week and weeks upcoming. So yeah, stick with us, guys. It's been such a blast. Once again, guys, I'm Jacob Courtwright. This is The Locker Room.